So, today we're going to do two things. We're going to learn the rules for significant figures during calculations. If you weren't here yesterday, there are some of these sheets available up here if you want to come grab one. I know Mason, I don't think you were here. Anybody else wants to grab one? So, you wrote these down, and it says the rules for multiplication and division. The term with the least number. Now, again, I don't really necessarily like this word right here. So, the word term, I'm more specifically referring to the value or the number itself. Okay, so the number, the value with the least number of significant figures determines the number of significant figures in your answer. So, what does that mean? All right, first of all, in this particular example, what are we doing with those two numbers? We're multiplying, okay? How many significant figures are in 4.46? There are 3. How many are in 1.4? There are 2. So go back to the rules. The value with the least number of sig figs determines the number of sig figs in your answer. So which one's less, 3 or 2? 2. Well, this is the number that pops up in your calculator. Okay. So what we've got to do is we've got to round that number to how many significant figures? 2 of them. So 6.38 turns into 6.4. Okay. Does that make sense? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait on this one. We'll come back to this one if we get to it in just a second. So let's look at the sheet that I gave you. And it's going to look like this. All right, and I'm actually going to need the first thing that I want you to do, and I don't know if you guys did it. This is just a quick basic review. See if you can determine the number of significant figures in A through E in just number 1. Just do those real quick. Should take you about 60 seconds, if that. Just the number of significant figures in A through E in that top part. Everybody get those? Now that it's been 45 minutes later. All right, number 1A. How many did you get for 1A? 3, very good. 1B, 3. 1C, 4, very good. 1D, and then 1E, 2, very good. So that should have been nice and easy, quick and simple. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up my calculator now. And what we're going to do is we're going to see if we can figure out how many significant figures are in these calculation things. So if you notice, all of the ones that we're doing in number 2 are multiplication and division. And just to refresh your memory, since it's been forever, remember it's the term or the number of the value with the least number of significant figures determines the one in your answer. Okay? So what I'm going to do is, you don't have to do this every time. I like to do it just to start off to kind of show you the methodology that I kind of approach it with, and you can eventually begin doing it visually. All right, so 0.034. Would you all agree that's 2 significant figures? Okay. 8.8. That's also 2 significant figures. Agree or disagree? Agree? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug this into my calculator. It is 0.034 times, not divided by, times 8.8, and that's what's going to pop up. Okay. Now, I need 2 significant figures, and this is a really weird one to start out on, but I think it works really well. So when I'm starting to count my significant figures, what side of that number am I going to start counting on? The left. So I'm going to go 1, 2. Well, there's an issue. First of all, do you all agree that it's at least 0 point something? Okay. But when we look at this 9, and when we go to the very next number as far as for rounding rules, what does that 9 make that other 9 do? It rounds up, right? So what does it round the 0.29 up to? 0.3. If you left it as 0.3, would you be right or wrong? That's wrong. How do you make it the 2 significant figures that you need? Add a 0. Very good. So 0.30. The second part of this completely has nothing to do with significant figures, is practicing making sure your units are correct as well. So we've got G/L times L. So what's your unit? All day I've been hearing G over L squared. Okay. If you look at it from this perspective, it may make it a little easier. G over L times L. What happens? L's cancel, leaving you with what? Just grams. So that should be your unit, just grams. Does that make sense? It's a little easier to look at it like this than it is the linear version. Okay? All right, so let's go to the next one. So 5.00, that is 3 significant figures. 6.00, that's also 3 significant figures. So out of 3 and 3, which one's the least? 3. So my answer must have 3 significant figures, right? So let me, oops, that's the wrong button. Let me clear this. Got my calculator. And I need to do 6 times 5, which is 30. Now, if you just wrote 30, that's technically not correct. Just the number 30 by itself is how many significant figures? 1. How do you make it 3? 0.0. That turns it into 3. Does that make sense? Yes, no, maybe, possibly? Now's the time to ask. Okay. All right, let's look at the next one. How many significant figures are in 45.9? 3. How many are in 1.50? 3. So my answer should have how many in there? 3. Very good. So let's clear this. And let's do 45.9 divided by 1.50. And that's the answer that pops up. What's the great news about that number? It's already got 3 significant figures. You don't have to change anything in it. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say it is 30.6. Now, my bad. I apologize. I've already messed up. We forgot to do the units. So we've got grams there. What about, go back up to G. Centimeters times centimeters is what? Very good. And then what is miles divided by hours? Miles per hour. That was easy. Miles per hour. Okay. All right. This was kind of weird. What is 36.2? How many sig figs? There are 3. What about just the number 4? 1. So your answer should have how many? 1. Just 1. All right. So let's do the math. So I've got 36.2 divided by 4. So what would it be to 1 significant figure? 9. Very good. And it's 9 what? Very good. 9 centimeters per minute. I know what you're thinking. What in the world is centimeters per minute? It's like a slug, right? Like a snail. It's a snail's pace. All right. And the last one. How many significant figures are in 3.56? 3. What about 2.45? And then 0.83? 2. So how many should your answer have? Just 2. Very good. All right, so let's look at what happens when you plug it in. It is 3.56 times 2.45 times 0.83 gives me that number right there. So what would that be rounded to 2 significant figures? Fantastic. 7.2. I want to do one more for you, and there's a reason why I'm going to do it. And by the way, what's the unit on that? Very good. Centimeters cubed. All right. Any questions out of those? Any questions? All right. The other one that I want to do for you is letter C. Clear all this. Okay. Letter C. So how many significant figures are in 870? 2. What about 430? 2. So your answer has to have how many? 2. Well, here's the problem. When you come in and you look at your work, 870 times 430, you get that answer. Now, let me ask you this question. What side of the number are you going to start counting your significant figures on? Okay? So, let's go from that perspective. Let me ask you this first. If I was going to write you a check here and today for a certain amount of money, okay? You told me you were going to start on the right, and I need 2 significant figures, so you're going to get $0. Do you want that? Is there another side you can start on to get more money? What side could you start on? Start on the left. How many do I need? I need 2. Now, so my question to you is, would you guys rather have $370,000 or just 37? You want the more money, right? So my question to you is, whenever you have numbers that are technically to the left, and maybe do it in a different color, technically to the left of the decimal that you don't need, do you drop them, or what do you do to them? Turn them to zeros. So 374,100 to two significant figures is not 37. You go, those are two totally different numbers. So what does the value turn into? It turns into 370,000. Those are the hardest problems for students to grasp onto. Once you get it, it makes sense. So think about it in terms of money. Do you want $37 or $370,000? You want the big one, right? So anytime you have numbers that are left of the decimal that you don't need, what do you do to them? Turn them to zeros. Okay? Does that make sense? Say that again. If the decimal's not there, turn them into zeros. Because technically, isn't this purple number written over here, that's two significant figures? Okay? Because if you dropped all those zeros, it's still two significant figures, but is 37 anywhere near 370,000? No. And our original number was 374,100, so we need to keep them equivalent. Okay? All right, you guys do the rest of these. And I know when you're going to get to Q, you're going to look at me real weird. See if you can figure it out. Yes, sir.